But I'm Carl. I work with Les Mills. I don't work with the UK team anymore, but I headed up their customer experience team for 6 years. Okay. Left there in April, but I work with the international team now. So I'm back speaking at this event, but know this team very well. I know this event very well because I've been here so many times before. But this session is really about how we timetable for growth. So it's really designed to be around about 25, 30 minutes with a workshop at the end, but maybe we won't get to that. We'll just have a chat at the end of it. So basically what we're doing here, or this session and how it's designed is, this is an excerpt from our 2-day Simsbury accredited group fitness management training program that we run. So we have a 8-module program that teaches operators how to run group fitness, from measuring the numbers, which we call the scoreboard, to recruiting, retaining and motivating instructors, through to this key play, which is timetabling for growth, or playing your A team, how you schedule effectively. Then we talk about marketing, we talk about events, and then we have a business plan at the end. So this is a short section out of that 2-day education program.
Brilliant. It's something that's so focused on sort of class-based.
Correct, yeah, and it's how to run successful group fitness operations. So we'll cover why timetabling matters, timetable review and analysis to show what we would do with a club partner and how we will rate that down, and then 5 key tips: how you play smart with programming, how you think horizontally and not vertically when it comes to programming, the express offering, how to make full use of real estate with some omni-fitness solutions, ongoing management, and then we'll skip the timetable exercise at the end, but we would have had a bit of a workshop in the room. Okay? So when it comes down, press the wrong button. When it comes to why we do what we do, why is it that we run group fitness? What business are we in? Why is it that we provide programming when so many people can go to a local park or go to another place where group fitness is so important? Now, whether we know it or not, we're not in the fitness business, we're in the motivation business. It's about how do we motivate individuals? How do we motivate people? Come on in. Come on in. That's all right, don't worry. Come and grab a seat. Come straight to the front, or as close to the front as you can get. I'm Carl. I've just run through the agenda of what we cover. I'll just quickly recap. Here's our agenda of what will come through in this session. Here's why timetabling matters, timetable review, and then the key play. So I'll whiz through those in a moment. We are in the motivation business and not the fitness business. Why do we say this? It's about how we motivate people to attend more often, more regularly. It's not always about the classes that we run. It's all right, come on in. This is now officially the busiest session I've run in this room today. So thank you for coming in. I'm glad you're here. And motivation can come in many different forms, from psychological and social, with social interaction, through to growth, through education, experiences, and also external through instructors and cool brands. Here's some key research that we have conducted over the years. Our latest research paper, by the way, our most valuable participant paper, I talked about earlier on in the session this morning. If you're interested in that paper, I'll bring the QR code, which looks at some of the latest results. But we know from working with 22,000 clubs around the world, with over 100,000 instructors and 7 million workouts every single week, the more often people come, the longer that they stay. And we think that the 2 visits per week is the tipping point for motivation for members, because we know if we can get people attending 2 visits per week, they're more likely to stay for longer. IRSA average still sits at around about 1.75, but if we can get them to 2, then as you can see here, the average tenure increases. If it's 1.5, they stay less than a year. 2 visits per week, 2 to 5 years, 2.2, and if you can get them to 2.4, the lifetime value is 10 years plus, because they've developed that positive exercise habit and they'll keep coming back for more. We also know that group fitness has huge motivational forces. From some of the research that we've done, particularly with the UK Active research, we found that participants that invest in quality group exercise attend 3+ times per week. So if you can get people attending 3+ times a week, the impact on the tenure and lifetime value for any member increases exponentially. So how do you do that? How do you program for that? How do you ensure that you have the right classes on in the right space? When it comes down to the reasons of why we do what we do, any club operator has 3 key things on their mind. Number 1, how do they get more members through the door? We know that 95% of high quality group training attendees will refer more people. We know that retention is a key challenge, continues to be a challenge in the industry, with members becoming more and more, I use the word promiscuous, not in that sense, but as in there's no loyalty to a brand. They'll jump from one gym to another. Retention's becoming less and less. But we know that if group training users are actively onboarded, have the right class with the right instructor at the right time, they stay on average 36 months. So there's a 3 years average tenure there for Group X members. And group training users have a higher value perception of their club, which means if you get the right classes in the right time slot with the right instructor, operators can charge more. We know this to be the case. So here's some of the reasons why timetabling is so important. But here is a quick snapshot of the MVP report that I alluded to earlier. Just to give you the background on this, by the way, earlier on this year, we conducted a report across 1,300 different gym operators across UK, Europe, and in the US, a couple in China as well, and looked at 2.6 million member journeys. So 2.6 million member journeys throughout, and looked at the impact of their training modality, how often they attended, which classes they attend, which gym workouts they were doing, and then looked at some things like lifetime value, retention, and how likely they were to refer. And what we found is that members who take part in our programs, Les Mills workouts, stay with the club 39% longer than gym-only members, 32% longer than other group training members. And we called these MVPs, the most valuable participants. They provide more revenue over time, and deliver greater return on your marketing investment, and make a stronger impact on your bottom line. So that's why we know that if we can get the classes right, in the right time slot with the right instructor, then we will retain more members. So here's the impact example. If you increase your penetration by 10% on unique users, and if you think about an average non-group training member being around about 12 months, this changes to a really significant impact with a membership price of around about £35 of 2,000 members in your base. If you increased it to 15%, that increases to 300 members, 200 additional unique members engaging, which equals a £31,000 increase in return, just by moving from 10% to 15%, a 5% shift in member penetration. So when we think about the business of Group X, the business of group training, by increasing by 5%, that's an additional 100 members coming to classes, which means it has a significant impact on bottom line. So the ROI is absolutely there to see. But in order to do that, you need to maximize your timetable, which is what we're going to talk about today. How do you take a regular group exercise timetable and apply some science, some art, and a little bit of instinct to make it work for your members? From working in the industry for years, two reasons are usually prevalent when it comes to why a timetable is put together. Number one, instructor availability. Who can teach what at what time? And many group fitness managers, coordinators, fitness managers, or whoever we want to call it, will program based on that instructor availability. I really want you to come in and teach this class in the evening. What else can you teach? Oh, I can also teach this. Well, I'll give you a back-to-back class there. But is that the right class for the members that are coming? Is it the right demographic profile? And is it the right class for those, for the overall membership across the entire schedule? So number one is instructor availability. The second reason why most programs are built is based on member feedback, and it's usually the vocal minority. Small group of members that say, we want this class at this time, we love this, but it's about 5% of the membership base. We've seen that the most impactful group training clubs around the world see up to 50% of their overall usage engaging with group training. So if you had 2,000 members attending twice per week, and you've got 50% of those members attending training, that's 2,000 group exercise visits every single week. And when you apply that to your bottom line, that's a significant figure. Now, of course, you've got to build big enough studios, you've got to have enough equipment, you've got to be able to cater to that demand and that space. But what we're going to talk about today and how you maximize your timetable really will change the way that you program. Come on in, grab a seat. So, the fastest and simplest way to increase weekly attendance is to give more classes to your popular instructors and your most popular programs. So what I talked about before about giving more classes to the instructors is partly true, but it's giving more classes to the popular instructors with the right programs for that time slot. And we've got 5 key tips to help you program in this way. We know that fans will vote with their feet. So the first thing we say is start by looking at class attendance. Attendance is the number one metric that we should all be reviewing within the industry, but it's the one that's least measured. I speak to so many fitness operators around their group exercise goals, and I ask them what's their average weekly attendance, or even what's their weekly attendance across their class timetables. They can't give me a figure. But if I were to say to them, how many members did you sign up last week? They would know that in an instant. How many personal training sessions are your personal trainers delivering? They can know that in an instant. What's your membership revenue? They'll know that. But they don't check in on the numbers around attendance. And it's an industry epidemic because we haven't been stringent around the data. So first thing that we recommend is that you analyze the popularity of programs and categories through the attendance data. You can do this 3 ways. Firstly, look at your average weekly attendance. So how many people are attending on a weekly basis? Then look at it over a 3 to 6 month time frame, and then by individual locations if you have multiple sites. Then by analysing this data, it gives you a benchmark of where you're currently at and how you can program. And one of the things I mentioned to Sean before we started, this module is taken, or this presentation is taken from one of our modules from our group fitness management training. And the first module is how do you track your numbers? How do you measure your numbers? How do you create a scoreboard around group exercise? Then we'd ask you to schedule more of your most popular program. So we said at the beginning, members will vote with their feet. So if you increase the number of your most popular classes until your average attendance is approximately equal for all programs and at an acceptable occupancy level, you start to build a class timetable. So here's an example of some of the analysis that we did. So we've got 5 different styles of classes on there, and we haven't made this all Les Mills. It would be really easy to put all of our programs on there. There are different classes on here. So we've got body pump, HIIT, core and abs, yoga and dance. The most commonly occurring programs at the top with body pump and HIIT, then core and abs, yoga, dance. Average attendance per class is 25, and you can look at your total weekly attendance. It's a really simple spreadsheet way of looking at those attendance numbers. But then when we start to apply some science to this, we know that there are 8 key genres globally that drive 80% of group exercise attendance. So if an operator were to speak to me and say, could you give me some feedback on my timetable? The first thing that I would do is look at their current schedule and map it against these benchmarks. And once again, these aren't Les Mills programs. They can be whatever style of programming you want. So strength and weights is the #1 fitness trend. Every club operator, in fact, I'm talking about it in the next session about the strength boom. Every club operator should have some form of strength training on their timetable. In fact, it should take up the biggest majority. Then some form of cardio training. So this can be circuit training with some resisted cardio. It can be dance-based classes, or dance is already there, but maybe aerobics classes or treadmill-based classes, rowing classes, some form of cardio-based activity. Mind Body is #3 on the list. And these are the trending as the #1 format since 2021. In fact, this one is growing exponentially year on year. Wellness becoming the biggest fitness trend out there and Mind Body classes being the biggest in demand. But how do you cope with that demand when historically Mind Body meant recruiting yoga instructors, Pilates instructors, all externally? They're in limited supply and they're essentially quite expensive to recruit. So how do you tailor to that demand? As I said, I'm covering that in the next session if you're coming along. Cycling continues to be a popular program. It has decreased, but cycling classes are still a global trend, as are dance, martial arts, HIIT training and core being at the lower end. We've seen a decline in HIIT training because there are other modalities, but they are still key. So this will be my first recommendation for you. If you're looking to improve your timetable, map your current schedule against these categories and see where you are over-indexing or under-indexing and rectify accordingly. Because we know from 22,000 clubs that we work with around the world, these are the biggest genres that are driving attendance. Just to help you with this, here are some genre descriptions. So you can take this, and if you want this presentation, by the way, I can send it to you afterwards, so no need to look at that. But just some definitions around each of those programs, which I pretty much gave a synopsis of before. And there's our classes on the right-hand side. So this is what it could look like if you were to map your classes versus the benchmarks. And we'll do this for you as a Les Mills partner. We'll take your schedule, plug it into our system, and do some analysis for the team. So the observations here, there's an opportunity to have more classes in martial arts, core, and cardio or other. Because as you can see, 2% of martial arts classes compared to 10, core classes down at 4%, and only 6% in cardio. So for this operator, there's definitely some gaps in how you can grow or grow your attendance if you focus on these areas. We'd also advise that you review HIIT and Mind Body, as these are the dominant genres and maybe oversaturated in comparison to actual attendance data. So just to confirm, these are based on number of classes offered on the schedule, not actual attendance. So here, for example, your core classes might only be at 4% of your schedule, but if they're packed out and rammed, you could be getting more people into the core classes than you would at dance at 5%. So it's just based on actual number of classes. Then the next thing we would recommend is start to look at the day and time zone. So this is another one that many operators fail to run through. Think about which are your busiest days and then look at which are your busiest times. So just to clarify, here are the different time slots and a different start and end. Although I'm not sure why we start early morning at 4 a.m. Do any of your clubs open at 4 a.m.? 24-hour gym, a 4 a.m. class. It's all for those airport workers and cab drivers probably that are out there. But these are the time slots that we've used for this analysis. So you can see here, Monday being the busiest in terms of the day, then Thursday is up there alongside Tuesday, Friday's pretty busy, and then Saturday and Sunday. And then when you're looking, it's actually morning between 8 and 12 that is the busiest time slot. So without even knowing this club, I'm guessing and estimating this is probably a residential club that has a high volume of attendees mid-morning, probably mums after school drop up or has creche or childcare facilities and have that accessibility of that club at that time. And that's just a guess, but it's a pretty educated guess with this format. So the observations, do the adjacent days and time zones reflect your current demand? So when you think about the overall club usage, what are you seeing in terms of the usage analysis? Is the morning oversaturated compared to the current activity in swipes? So for example, they may be really, really busy on the gym floor on a Wednesday evening, but the classes and the attendances to classes are down. So there's an opportunity there to bring people off the gym floor into the studio. Would adding more lunchtime and afternoon or early evening classes work? And then we'd advise that to review your historic timetables to sense check for growth opportunities. So day analysis and time analysis is definitely something that we would look at that will help you shape your timetable. So tip 1, we'd advise that you play smart with your programs. Offer at least 1 or 2 programs for each main training need. So if you were to write a timetable from scratch, you had a blank timetable from the start, we would say 2 programs in strength and weights, wellness and mind, body, and cardio. Fairly no-brainer. But so many operators will look at this and go, what member feedback have we had? They really want more Pilates and more yoga classes. We haven't got a lot of member feedback on strength and weights. Yet we know from the industry and the boom of strength training, particularly when you look at, and it's been talked about here today, GLP-1, Ozempic, Mounjaro, the need for strength training alongside these weight loss jabs. Strength training classes are something that every club operator needs to be providing right now. So it's not always about member feedback, it's about providing something that is in need in terms of that trend. So play smart with your programming is number 1. Tip number 2, and this one I can spend hours on, but I won't do. Tip number 2 is think about your schedule horizontally and not vertically. So here's a typical timetable that we have on the board. Yes, it's populated with Les Mills programming, but substitute them out for something else if you need to. Most operators that I know will place their timetable on a board with, here are your Monday classes on one sheet, then your Tuesday classes, then your Wednesday classes and your Thursday classes. And they think about what classes do we offer on a Monday? And what do we offer on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on and so forth. Whereas we know with member training patterns that members train, users train, consumers train at certain times of the day. So for me, for example, just because of my lifestyle and because of what happens at home, I need to be out of the house early in the morning, get back for when my kids wake up. So I'm in the gym 5:30, 6 a.m. every day of the week if I can. Doesn't always happen. So this is the time slot that would work for me. Now, if I was looking at this club timetable, I wouldn't go beyond this part. I would look across here. Which classes can I go to at that time slot during the day? So what we recommend is that you offer each of your core programs at least 2 to 3 times a week within a 1 or 2 hour time frame. The simplest way to do that, think mind body, think core, think cardio, and think strength, and then look across that time slot and say, do I offer enough strength classes, enough cardio classes, enough mind body on this schedule? So straight away, the first thing I would say to this operator is, you have one body balance class here on a Friday, there's nothing else for the rest of the week. What could you offer on a different day to offer that as an opportunity. Because people may attend at that time, but you want multiple attendees, and therefore you want multiple options. Then, ensure you offer cross-training variety within a 1 to 2 hour time frame across the week. What we mean by cross-training is the opportunity to train in different ways. Don't just offer body pump classes at the same time slot all the way across. Too many timetables that I've analysed in the past, you go in and go, okay, which classes do you run early morning? Cycle classes. Why do you run cycle classes? Because they're really popular. What's the real reason you run cycle classes? Because the PT that's on shift at that time in the morning can teach cycle. Okay, that's the real reason why you've got cycle across that schedule. Whereas you should be looking at, well, what's your strength training opportunity? What's your mind-body training opportunity? So cross-training will give better member benefits, it will allow for adoption, and it will also change the way that people train. So this is probably the most powerful tip that we use and really creates positive change if you do it effectively. So think horizontally across your time slots and not vertically. Tip number 3, offer 30-minute or express classes. Now, as you can see, this is actually a real class schedule. It's fairly busy, and it's full of Les Mills programming. It's actually one of our clubs, so it's going to be everything that we do. But as you can see here, it's about how you maximize the time slot. When we speak to many operators and they say, my timetable is full, I cannot offer any more classes on my schedule. We know that that's a common misconception because most operators have a Group X studio that sits dormant for 80% of their operating hours. Doesn't get utilized. If that was a hotel manager, they would get sacked for not maximizing their occupancy. Their room rate would go sky high to ensure that they get the right return on the investment of those rooms. Yet we treat Group X size studios as something different. So what we recommend is offer express and 30-minute classes in as many time slots as you can. So this doesn't mean you run just 60-minute programming, maybe you run 45 minutes, or you run 30-minute schedules. The other thing here is this is an old program because we've even got CX Works and Shabam on there, which programs we no longer have as those titles. But when you look across your schedule, when you look across your timetable, think about maximizing the space by, we know that this time slot is fairly busy, so 60 minutes is the right time slot for these classes. In fact, we've only got a 45-minute class time slot across here. Then as you come down, we've got some more 30-minute programs here, and 60 minutes as it starts to pick up, and 30-minute programming. You've also see on here, you can't really see on this slide from further back, but where you've got a circle, these are virtual classes. So these aren't all instructor-led classes. These are virtual classes up on a screen in the studio. So when you look at this and when you're thinking about attracting new members, and by the way, industry research indicates that 6 out of 10 new members joining a fitness facility are looking at group training. It's the #1 reason they join clubs. If they look at a website, if they look at social media, or they're looking for a schedule, if I was to see this, I would say, that's a fairly packed group training program. I'll get extreme value for money out of this program because there's lots of classes that I can go to. When you narrow it down though, it's actually only a few classes delivered by instructors that's a real cost. But it's a great way of maximizing the space that you have by offering more classes across your schedule with 30, 45 and 60-minute programs. And tip 4 feeds in to that exact point. Make the most of your full real estate. So you can see here, this is a cycle studio for a club operator. This is just offering cycling classes. If you were to take off all of these classes that are in the black dots, they're all the virtual classes, this would look completely different. This would run approximately, well, let's count it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classes per day on a Monday. That's a fairly busy studio in comparison to 1, 2, 3 classes in that studio on a Friday. As in instructor-led classes, apologies. Instructor-led classes, 3 on a Friday, 7 on a Monday. If you strip out the virtual classes, it looks like a very, very sparse space. So we've seen the impact on virtual classes around the globe. We've seen the impact that virtual programming can have on new members attending classes for the first time. There's less intimidation, there's less need to stay for the whole class, there's more likelihood to just give it a try, which can then feed into live class participation. The other thing in terms of virtual classes at off-peak times, it adds massive value to the members because, for example, they're paying for a membership and they want to get in multiple times per week, but they can't always attend a class because it's always at peak times. Virtual programming will get them attending in those time slots. And when we come back to one of our original stats, 2 visits per week, if you've got a member that's attending 2 virtual classes every single week in your cycle studio, they're going to continue with that exercise habit. So it's a very, very positive thing to do. So maximize your real estate, offer as much as you can within the studio by offering both live and virtual classes. There is another point to this as well with what we call the omni-channel experience. So if you've got live instructor-led classes, that's always going to be your go-to. That's going to be the biggest return on investment. Then you've got virtual in club, which we've just talked about, and maximizing the space. But we're seeing now that digital fitness or virtual at-home classes continue to be on the rise. Recent research indicates that it's approximately a 60-40 split. So for example, if a club member was attending 2 classes per week in club, it's more likely they'll do 1 class at home as well. In extreme cases, it's 3 classes in the club and 2 classes at home. So we're seeing a real shift in terms of how people are engaging with fitness and how they're doing so. So if you can, as an operator, think about live instructor-led classes, absolutely virtual into the studio, but do you have an at-home offering as well that's going to complement the overall solution? And our tip number 5, ongoing management to grow the numbers. So if we review what we've covered off so far, we've thought about different time zones and different day analysis. We're thinking about the right programs in the right time slot by offering strength, mind, body, and core, strength, mind, body, and cardio. We thought horizontally and not vertically. Then we're thinking about maximizing the studio with the right real estate. Then we need to start analyzing the numbers. So the first thing, identify underperforming classes. Now this will vary depending on how you want to identify them. Many operators just look at occupancy as the golden figure. So in the past, during our group fitness management module, we would have said, what's the occupancy of the class that you want to be aiming for? 70%, 75%, 80% occupancy. I would absolutely advocate that measure if it was a peak time class. But not all time slots are created equal. So occupancy isn't always right. The other one we used to advocate for would be cost per head. But cost per head is a misleading figure because you could have a gym instructor on the gym floor teaching a class that gets paid for within their shift. There's no additional cost. Their cost per head would be considerably lower than an external freelance instructor that would be paid for that class, yet the freelancer will have more members. So cost per head isn't always the figure to use. I would always strongly advocate to set specific individual targets for each individual class on your schedule. Just as you would a brand new personal trainer starting in your facility, just as you would a sales advisor, I would advocate for an individual target. So for example, if you have a capacity of 40 in a studio and you've got a brand new instructor, it's absolutely fine when you launch that class for the first 4 weeks for 15 to 20 people to be in that class and grow the numbers as the months progress. Whereas if you say it needs to be at 80% occupancy from day 1, it's unrealistic, that class is never going to work. So set the targets and then identify underperforming classes against the targets that you're setting. Then pinpoint the reason for underperformance. There's 3 reasons why a class doesn't work. Wrong program, wrong instructor, wrong time slot. That's usually the reason for underperformance. Is it the right program for the time slot? As I said at the beginning, if you just put that class on because an instructor can teach back-to-back classes and their second class, they're not as strong as their first class, but you've put it on just to give them the work to get them into the club. Well, the program isn't necessarily right. Time slot, some classes just don't work at certain times. There's some clubs that I've worked with that have a high abundance of HIIT training classes at peak time in the evenings, but you put it on early morning, you don't get the uptake because of the type of demographic that's attending. And the third one is simply down to the instructor. Is the instructor the right instructor for that time slot? There are some great instructors that will work mid-morning with the demographic that's attending there, but you put them into an evening class, their style of teaching just does not work. So identify the reason for underperformance, and then we advocate to create an action plan. Doesn't mean fire the instructor, but how can you give them feedback? How can you coach them? How can you share with them member feedback? Maybe you set a different target for that class. You've achieved 15 in that class. Well, okay, let's set a target of 20. Let's get 5 more members in the next 3 months to see if that class is successful, rather than saying, let's get you to 80% occupancy. So we talked through how to create these action plans and some of the reasons behind that through our training. But we would absolutely recommend that you do these 3 key things when you're looking at your current schedule. So here's the example. We've got 5 reasons why classes aren't working, and a couple of them on there are out of our control, but program, instructor, time slot, we've just covered across there. Marketing, sometimes it's down to the program isn't being marketed effectively, both internally and externally. Are we talking about the class? Another one is, if I'm quite honest with you, and I see this in a lot of operators, the class name does not represent what the program actually is that you're offering. It's just a generic class name that doesn't tell you anything. So if you were to put, let's use one from way back. There was an operator. Change the story. I did some analysis once for an operator, and it was a 90-site operator in the UK. And when we analysed their schedule, there was 138 different variations of class names on their website. 138. There were 17 different variations of step. There was step, step and jump, step and pump, step and jump and pump, step and jump and pump and funk. There was different variations on this timetable, and members were just confused. They had no idea what the class was. So this comes back to marketing. What is the class that you're offering? Do the members know what it is? Do they know what the results are? Are you advertising in the right way? Are your sales consultants talking about it through in the onboarding process? Is there enough marketing in and around the club? Is it available on the app? Are you talking about your schedule? Then, the 5th one is always a touchy one, internal communication or politics we put on there. A group of members or staff undermining program success or boycotting the classes. So the example that we give in this scenario is when we launch Body Balance. So our program Body Balance is a blended fusion of yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. When we launched this in our clubs in New Zealand, and we're still an independent operator, we run 12 clubs in New Zealand still, all of the yoga instructors were up in arms because it wasn't pure yoga. The Pilates instructors were up in arms because it wasn't pure Pilates. Tai Chi instructors didn't care because they were Zen. But what happened was the yoga instructors were speaking to members and undermining the program launch of Body Balance, basically saying it wasn't pure, it didn't have the background, didn't have the philosophy, it's watered down. So members believed the yoga instructors and didn't attend Body Balance. So by talking to each of the members, by increasing marketing, by getting instructors upskilled to talk to the members, we addressed that and dealt with these internal communications. But this happens all the time. The best place for member feedback, and don't ask me how I know this, but the best place for member feedback on classes is in the changing room after the class. Don't ask me how I know that, especially the female changing room. I don't hang around in there. But you hear the feedback in the changing room straight after a class. An instructor friend of mine was mortified because they were in a cubicle and the members came in and absolutely slated their class afterwards. But you want to be listening to what's happening with the members, and sometimes that small group of members, or what I call the vocal minority, can have a negative impact on other members' experience within the club. So if you're looking at your schedule right now and you think, look, there's a class on the timetable and I've no idea why it's not working. The first 3 I always go to, top 3 reasons of underperformance is the wrong program in the time slot, the wrong instructor, or the wrong time slot overall for that style of class. But then think about how you're marketing, and also think about your internal communication and your politics. So, just to recap, and then we've got some time for questions, if you wish. Here are some of our tips for a successful timetable. I'm conscious I whizzed through a lot of that because that's a 3-hour section of our training broken down into 40 minutes. So the first thing, ensure efficient flow of classes and studios. When we talk about flow, we want people to cross-train. Yes, sometimes we have people going back to back, but some of the biggest operators that we've worked with that have really managed their flow is staggering the start times of their classes, particularly if they're oversubscribed and busy. If you've got multiple studios, stagger the class time so members can't do back-to-back classes. So it doesn't always sound like the right member-focused approach, but you're better off doing that to get more people through the studios rather than the same people doing the same classes at the same time. Maximise your core programming at peak slots. We talked about how to do that. Consider the order of classes to limit chances of injury, i.e. resistance before cardio. We sometimes see this a lot, and when we launched CX Works, as it was called then, but Les Mills Core as it is now, we strongly advocated not running core classes before our body pump classes. Why? Because if you pre-fatigue the core system before you go into lifting weights, you're more likely to cause injury. So it's the same thing on a schedule. Think about how you schedule the program. So if members are doing back-to-back, think about how you schedule those. Do your AM and PM members have access to the same classes? So are you negatively impacting the morning members because you're offering a different style of class than the evening members that can't get in the evening for whatever reason? Timetable around your entry data. We talked about time slot analysis. We talked about days of the week. So age, if you can dial into your demographics, and if you can dial into your demands, that's the science behind programming. Looking at who's attending, at which time, and what they're looking to train in, and program around this. Timetable around the members' demand and not the instructors, and not around the vocal minority. It's not the 5% of members that are already attending. In fact, their feedback, whilst is welcomed, isn't the most valuable when it comes to running a successful timetable. Aim for 60% of current members, but have an allocation for 40% of new members. Can you get new members into the studio? Can you onboard them in the right way? Consider smart programming in your early morning and lunchtime slots, particularly if you think about express type formats, 30 minutes or even 45. And make sure that specialist classes do not dominate key time slots. So a specialist class, for example, could be you have a rock star freestyle instructor that can only teach in your club once a week. They have a huge following, and you put it slap bang in the middle of your peak time slot. Because of their following and because of the demand, consider placing that instructor at a shoulder time slot, so not necessarily in the middle of peak time, but shoulder either before or after it gets busy and people are more likely to attend. Whereas if you, in the middle of your peak time slot, offer a program that you can replicate throughout the week and people have the option to attend. It's not always about how we used the program, which was your busiest instructors and best instructors in the middle of your time slot. If they can only do one class a week, it doesn't serve you in the long term because you can only offer it once. So that's what we mean by specialist class. All right, I'm going to pause there. Conscious I've just spoke at you.